Welcome back everyone to Gotcha Interact. Today we're going to be talking about Chasca and a pre-release guide. Now we've already talked about her multiple times at this point, so if you guys want to learn more in-depth on her kit, how she's going to work, or how her past versions have worked as well, we're going to just go over a very basic sense on how she works as a character, then just give our thoughts of what we think is going to happen with the character when she releases. This is just a pre-release analysis, basically looking at everything we've already looked at in the past videos, kind of getting that final look right before the character releases. Most likely this is exactly what we're going to see from Chasca, whereas some other previous versions, a few different things have changed over time, so we're just going to kind of give a brief overview to the character, maybe some teams, what you should look for her, how you should be kind of looking at her as a character so that you can know if you actually want the character or not. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. Looking at Chasca, she is going to be an Anemo DPS, and Anemo DPS is kind of the idea of really how you should be looking at her. I think overall, a lot of people already know this, especially if you already have your thoughts about Chasca, but Chasca is going to be a more Anemo DPS, once again, I have to say, because she's going to be doing a lot of different elements as well, personal damage, and this is even going to talk about how, when you look at her as a character, looking for an attack percent goblet over an Anemo damage bonus goblet, because she can do more than one type of element for damage. But overall, it's going to be a lot easier, in my personal opinion, for what I've seen with her, to actually kind of have a balanced crit ratio. Most likely with the DPSs that we get from Natlan, usually they're going to be using the Obsidian Codex set, which is giving some crit rate. She's going to ascend into crit rate, so I think going into crit damage, like some of the other characters, is going to be extremely easy, kind of like Mualani. If you have her, similarly, that's kind of how you're going to build her. It's go a lot into crit damage because you get so much just from her initial kit. So I think overall, that's at least in a crit ratio aspect, how she's going to look like, her ascensions and what she's going to be like as a character. Now, Rift, if you could go ahead and talk about just her kit in general, her skill, how does that work, her burst, kind of what people should look forward to, especially maybe talent level priority that they should look at as well for the character.
So looking at Chasca's skill, when you use this, it's going to go into her Night Soul state and deal some AoE Anemo damage as well. And she has a Night Soul point cap of 80. And so she's actually going to gain all 80 of those when you go into the Night Soul state with the skill. And this will continually deplete as you use her abilities, the normal and even the charged attacks, which is kind of the main focus of Chasca. If you hold your charged attack in her Night Soul Blessing state, she's going to build up these little bullets you'll see at the top right of the screen. Once again, many of you players have probably already seen this if you've watched the live stream as well, or just any footage on her. Filling up those 6 bullets, once that hits all 6, then it releases all of the bullets to deal their damage. The first 2 are always Anemo. The third one is a conversion based on a passive, which we will talk about later. And then the last 3 are also with the base kit, doing an elemental conversion based on the characters in your team. So in the most basic sense, she's just dealing a lot of different types of damage. Anemo being her main form, just because she is an Anemo character, but she's getting a lot of different types of damage in there based on the team you are using. So she can be pretty flexible on just what kinds of damage she is doing. And now one interesting thing that came to my mind specifically with her playstyle and using her Night Soul state with her skill and all of this is the fact that she's giving a specific elemental conversion. It makes me wonder, and you just talked about Vixen, how she's going to have a pretty good crit ratio with Obsidian Codex, the Ascension, her weapon. You're going to do crit damage circlet, most likely, regardless of the weapon. And so she's going to have a pretty high crit ratio, like you've already stated. It makes me start to wonder, is the elemental conversion damage that she's doing, is that going to crit or not? Because if you think about swirl reactions, the swirl reaction itself, I don't think crits, like if you're using Hazo or even Wanderer, any type of swirls, those themselves aren't critting. It's their personal Anemo damage that's critting. But I think with Chasca, what's going to be really interesting with her is that she's getting a specifically stated elemental conversion that's stated in the kit to probably mean that if she's getting those different bullets, those last 4 bullets to change to Pyro or Hydra, let's just say, those specific hits might even be critting themselves. So you'll be seeing pretty high Pyro and Hydro numbers from whatever team you're using her in, if you're like using Bennett and Xiangling or whatever, with Farina as just an example for that. So that's something interesting to think about, because she's going to do the Anemo damage, but also be dealing these other types of damage. Once again, why we have talked about using like an attack goblet instead of your Anemo damage goblet. Or if you use Pyro, Hydro based on the conversions, you're only, giving a small percentage of her overall damage a little buff from the main stat. So I think attack percent all the way. I kind of thinking about EM as a possibility, but once again, I just don't think so, just because it's not working the same exact way as a character like Wanderer, where Wanderer is just dealing straight Anemo damage and then getting a lot of swirls. I'm not saying you should put Elemental Mastery Sand or Goblet, by the way, on Wanderer. I'm just, as an example, the way the swirl reaction works, the swirl damage will be higher with more EM. That's what I'm getting at. And so with Wanderer, just the way he works, he's actually swirling a lot. And I think Chasca may be swirling a bit, but also the point of this is being that her actual output of damage with these conversions are going to be primarily the Pyro on the Pyro Bullet, or Hydro on the Hydro Bullet, and maybe some Anemos tacked on with it or something like that. It's just something to think about. And something that kind of came to my mind with the elemental conversion process. But I guess we will just have to see what that looks like.
Yeah, I think I agree. Overall, with her as a character, you have 6 bullets basically when you take this shot, and you kind of charge up. And at that point in time, then you can see the first few bullets, depending on passives and whatnot, that the number will change. But you have the first few bullets are going to be Anemo, so you're specifically going to, each bullet is going to designatedly do a certain damage number, as well as with it a specific elemental type of damage. And so that fourth, fifth, and sixth shell are going to change to the 3 different types of elements like you were talking about, Rift. So those hydro numbers that you see, the pyro numbers, the cryo, the electro numbers, they are going to be that specific thing. But like you're talking about, EM I don't think it's going to be too bad on her, and never mind swirl. But especially if you have like 2 pyro characters and a hydro character in there, possibly with maybe some extra help by getting another pyro or hydro bullet in there, you could actually allow yourself to vaporize and get some pretty good damage. Now, giving yourself, I think, a 1.5 times buff, depending on which way it goes, maybe a 2 times, depending on which bullets kind of hit off the next off of each other. Because they're all kind of happening at one time, but because they're all happening at one time, you are allowing yourself to possibly allow yourself to not only swirl, but electrocharge, vape, kind of just stuff like that, or freeze or whatnot. So those numbers actually can be increased, like you're talking about with Elemental Mastery. So I think that the EM isn't going to be a stat you go for, but something that's not totally useless if you actually get it, like it is kind of with some other characters.
Exactly, not terrible, but it's not necessarily a completely wasted stat. Still, attack percent's going to be a lot better. And just looking at the multipliers for what we're seeing, I mean, the unconverted, Anemo Shadow Hunt shells, the very first 2, have a damage multiplier, assuming you have the talent at level 10 or crowned before constellations, has a damage multiplier of 87.8%. Okay, pretty good. But then you look at the Shining Shadow Hunt shell damage, that is just shy of 300%. So the elemental converted bullets are already just intrinsically doing a lot more damage. So who knows? Maybe with like a mono team where, let's say you're using all of your off-field characters with Chasca are all one element, like all pyro. Let's just say you're using Bennett, Xiangling, and Toma, just for sake of the example. You're only going to be converting to pyro bullets, and 4 of them, the last 4, will be pyro bullets, the first 2 being Anemo. With the modifiers, though, she's actually going to be doing, based on the looks of this, more pyro damage than she would be doing even Anemo damage. And maybe competitive with her Anemo damage if you just tack on the burst, perhaps. But, like, that is something interesting to think about, because it's a conversion. This isn't just tacking on a little bit of pyro with Anemo. It's completely changing those last 4 bullets damage type. So I don't know, that's just something to think about, because like, what do you think? Would that change her builds if she actually is outputting more elemental damage than Anemo damage from these other elements?
I think overall, even if you are doing pyro, like I was actually thinking, what if you do a mono pyro team, quote unquote, by having Chasca as the driver, because then she would be kind of your mono pyro, once again, quote unquote pyro, because she's changing 4 out of 6 of her bullets possibly into pyro, doing mainly pyro damage with a little bit of Anemo. So that could be a thing. I was also thinking about, well, okay, like you're saying, like the attack percent goblet's definitely always going to be better. I don't really ever think you're going to want to choose a specific damage bonus goblet with her as a character, even if you have that, because once again, that damage is still nice to have. The extra little bit of the Shadow Hunt shells, that's still about half the number or a third of the number of what you're getting in these other damage hits, so it's still helpful overall. Also, I think Shilonen working with this could be really good as well, allowing for a little bit more, maybe, you know, it could be another character. Now that will get rid of one of those bullets, Rift. If you kind of get my drift by getting, you know, a character that's not one of the core four, you're not having that switch. So it's one less bullet. But at the same time, I think having her buff, maybe the pyro bullets, it might be worth it with all the elemental damage bonus she'll give and possibly the resistance shred that she'll give because she's kind of there helping the pyro. Maybe those pyro numbers will spike and make it worth it. I don't know. What do you think?
I think so, yes. Now, I can understand people being like, yeah, well, you're losing that elemental conversion. I get it. But Shilona is just utterly insane with the buffs she's giving. I think she would completely offset it. And it just depends on how much damage Chasca is putting out with these individual bullets. If these individual bullets are ridiculous, who knows? Maybe it's not the best idea. It just kind of depends. Maybe you would be losing damage. I don't know. But it's hard to say that because, once again, Shilona is just so cracked for buffing damage. Also, just another thought, if you're not using Shilonen for Chasca and you're using Chasca in the Abyss, you can use the Shilonen for the other side. I do like how universal Shilonen is, and I don't think she can't be used in a Chasca team just because she would be buffing everyone's damage because Chasca's teammates are also going to be working for Shilonen as well. They have a lot of teammates, Shilonen and Chasca that is, that are going to be core elements of the core four, which help both of these characters out. So any team you do with Chasca and Shilonen both in the team, even though Shilonen doesn't directly help Chasca out, she helps her indirectly because the other teammates, and then Chasca's teammates giving her conversion allows Shilonen to help Chasca. So there's it's kind of a weird triangulating thing. So I can't say it's not going to work, and I think it would be pretty good, to be honest. So
I'm interested to see how Mawika, possibly Shilonen, and Chasca are all going to kind of try to fit together in a team. I think that's going to be a very interesting team. Also, like you're talking about Farina, obviously a strong character to be thrown in there as a teammate. There's so many characters, especially with an Anemo character. Just any of the core four that's really a good character as a support is going to do pretty well. Xiangling, Xingqiu, Yelan, you could try to throw together. Just keep in mind that these are charge attacks, not normal attacks. So the application is going to be as good, but you will still get the elemental conversion. Kukomi, cryo characters, maybe you need a shield so that, you know, you get a little bit more, you know, resistance while you're up there. Maybe
could
some
use
shielders. Layla was the one I was
even
thinking of.
Beto. They both work with charged attacks.
So I think there's going to be a lot of good things that come out of people using Chasca. I'm interested to see what kind of people actually do. I'm also very excited to actually be able to play her in the trial. So I guess that's really everything we have, Rift. So if you guys have any other thoughts and maybe any other ideas, maybe that me and Rift didn't bring up, let us know down in the comments. This was more of a speculation type idea with her. Once again, she's coming out very, very soon. Let us know if you're going to be pulling her. We'll hope then wish you the best of luck. Hopefully early 50-50s and wins as well. But I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Check out our Discord as well. Thank you guys for watching the video, and we'll see you guys in the next one.